Okay, I think we're live now. Hey! This is... Excuse me for the technical difficulties. We'll get this show started here. Can someone check the live stream, like outside? Just make sure that's still working. Cool. Welcome to Open Source for Great Profit. I know it said great good, but let's just call it profit. I like that title better. So, this is a cause I'm really passionate about. I've seen what happens when you are, with the confidence you can get just by getting a pull request accepted in a major project or a small project. The confidence to students or beginners and seniors alike is a major confidence boost and a potentiator in your career. It opens doors and gives you a narrative that you wouldn't otherwise have. It's a great way to set yourself apart when you are a fresh boot camp grad, like many of my students, and you want to stand apart on the stack of resumes on your hiring manager's desk that you're really trying to impress. And you know, if they remember your name, it's really just guessing or something. But it's not that bleak, but almost. So this talk is about delivering you a key advantage, and that is open source. We're going to cover through. Oh yeah, I'm terrible at remembering to introduce myself and cover my name. Hey, so my name's Dan Levy. I'm the web program manager at Lambda School, and I'm an educator, former entrepreneur, and a maker, a hacker, and coder of all things. I've contributed to a number of open source projects in small measure and large. A couple of them you may have heard of. I've done some Node.js work, mostly to the website there, and some other pull requests that didn't get merged. And then it's really hard to land a code pull request in Node. But some other notable ones are React Router, Bluebird, Gatsby.js, and yes, I'm reading the list because I actually have to keep track because you will forget these things. And Docker. Docker, I did a bit of shell, a few hundred and something lines of shell code. Really, it helps to keep a list. Just note to yourself. Keep track of the stuff somewhere. So, is open source just about donating, volunteering? Is that what it's about? I mean, what else do you get out of it? So, really, I wanted to highlight some of the rarely discussed pros and cons that I don't really see online. Like, there's a lot of great resources that will tell you how to do an open source contribution, tell you how to negotiate and frame and make sure that your code is going to be wanted, or your ideas are well vetted and welcomed by the team, or all these moving parts. And those are great resources. I'll definitely include them later and make sure to share them on Twitter. But the key is, I hear from everyone. Where do I start? Yeah, cool, I'm all for this. I love open source. I use it all the time. But where do I start? So we're going to go and I'm going to go through the pros and cons at perhaps a different angle than you're used to, and then we'll talk about where to start. So the reason we want to give back to open source is, notice it's at the bottom of my list here. Not because it's unimportant, but because it's okay to align your selfish interests with the greater good, because they can. And one of the things that was an unexpected benefit to me was I was able to work on many different open source projects and get exposure to different CI/CD pipelines, different merge and review processes. Every team does it differently. And whether you're contributing to a project that's run under Microsoft's GitHub and they make you sign a contributor license agreement and they've got a really dialed in process for all that, you'll get to see that. And the cool thing is, I didn't have to get a job. I didn't have to go and win their favor before any of that. I found a bug, offered a fix, and hey, I got to see this interesting process, how they've automated their systems. And what happened after a couple experiences like that, it turns out I became maybe not an expert at all, but definitely someone who's experienced in 5 different continuous integration and continuous delivery tools and pipelines that are very common. I didn't realize how unique that was until I started interviewing and people were asking me, so do you know this system or that system? And I was like, yeah. Like, how do you know all this? Well, I don't know all of it. All I know is that this is a cheap and easy way to get exposure to all these different systems. And I wasn't claiming to know all these systems, but I could talk about how they worked and what the benefits were, the trade-offs, or which ones were faster or slower, which ones could incorporate diverse tool chains. Like I knew them at that high level, but that was enough to make an informed discussion in an interview context, which is a really powerful setting to be able to dispense with a relevant technical knowledge. That's what it's about. So being able to get exposure to all those different things, normally you have to get fired a whole bunch before you can say that. Before you can say, this experience isn't cheap. Usually you've got to earn it through a lot of careers or a lot of jobs in your entire career. Open source is a cheap way to check those boxes, to get that experience, and actually experience different team dynamics, because you also get to work with different people, and probably internationally. You get to deal with language barriers, you get to deal with programming language barriers, you get to deal with asshole maintainers, not naming names, but maybe offline. All that stuff happens, but if you can show how you've been able to work with intractable maintainers or organizers, then it paints a really good story that you can share with a hiring manager. Say, hey, if they say, hey, tell me about a time where you couldn't get your decision to get heard, or you had trouble being heard on your team. Say, well, I actually had a recent experience on this open source project where the maintainer just flamed me up for even bothering something that I was just trying to volunteer. And you can say, like, look at how well I handled this. Here's an actual transcript in the pull request. They're telling me I'm a dummy, and I'm saying, hey, what are your priorities? Why is this not appreciated? Those sorts of things are a great way, which, by the way, always behave well, because it will be on your permanent record. And but if you are trying to contribute, it gives you all kinds of opportunities for those points in interviews when they're asking for experiences where you couldn't get your way, or you were able to persuade people who were maybe not with you to begin with. Just having that forced communication in writing is a really great opportunity to show that, and it helps to reinforce, along with that, you get to demonstrate your values of giving back and your sense of community. These are really important things when you're trying to set yourself apart in the job market. And let's get to some cons here, because I was talking to some friends and they're a little bit, let's just say jilted, depressed, jaded open source contributors. And honestly, one of them happens to be a well-known Debian or former Debian contributor, and he's jaded. There's definitely an aspect to this where you've got to be aware of your ecosystem and your tool chain and your community. And I'll touch on this more later, but it's really an important thing to be aware of where you're trying to contribute. It may not be a receptive environment, and that happens. So you got to realize you're only putting in a small amount of skin in the game to offer some code up. Like I said, you're not going to get fired over it, hopefully. So I should point out that it's very easy for me to just say, I do open source, and I do want to point out that it does take some privilege to be able to do this, to work for free. So be aware, even if you are a starving student, that I do appreciate the difficulty that comes with trying to just do some work for free. So it leads into this next part I'm going to talk about, where we try to figure out what to do so that we don't end up trying to rewrite Docker or something ambitious. And of course, there's the normal politics, and whole working for free kind of goes back to the privilege thing. This is something you've got to be able to do, and be aware what your limits and what you, and sometimes you have to communicate those limits to the team that you're trying to contribute to. Say, hey, can I get a review? They may say, hey, we'll get to this in a month. That might be their timetable, and then that might not work for you. You may say, okay, well, I'll get to that after the summer break, and some of these things can take a very long time, but as long as you're communicating the time frame, the working for free bit can kind of work itself out in several many cases. Okay, because every presentation needs 3 easy steps or 3 points. Anyway, this is my 3 easy steps. So when you're trying to figure out what to actually do, this is the rub. So who struggled at all or needed to Google something on their last project? Okay, it's about 95%. Okay, to the one person who doesn't have their hand up, I'd like to talk to you after this meeting.
Use Bing.
Quiet in the cheap seats. So basically, the point is, so basically, if you remember those struggles, your inclination as a developer is to ignore them. Bury the pain, bury it deep so that you can store it for later, for when you're with your therapist or whatever. That is a strategy to deal with the struggles we encounter day to day. But it really, you know, and
Oh, no. Just go to sleep. Just go to sleep.
Hey. Okay, I'm going to stand really still. No one move. Okay, tech, please work. Okay, so what didn't spark joy, aside from the projector? That's the question. Figure out what really sucked in this project. The things that you want to forget about. The reason is, those are the opportunities you have to actually connect the dots for the next development. This is when you recall the fix. Oftentimes, you found the answer in a blog or some podcast or whatever. It could have been a YouTube video, it doesn't matter. The point is, we all go through the hunt trying to find the solutions we're looking for. At some point, our trail of breadcrumbs from a README or whatever ends. And we're like, well, what do I do next? I see a bunch of nodding. Yeah, exactly. This is a familiar situation. When you're in that spot, I'll just write a note to myself. I've gotten this good habit where you just write a note. It's usually got some swear words in it, but I write a nice little note to come back to. In this case, I recently did some contributions to React Router, which I'll describe more. But it was I caught myself talking trash about it, and it was more. I wasn't talking trash about the library. It was the experience that developers had going to find out how to use it. I was like, wait, that's a fixable problem, because some people have great success. I noticed in my classrooms, half the students just have no problems at all. And the other half were just like, how does anyone use this? What is going on? So maybe in my position as a teacher, I can have a little bit of a live A/B testing scenario or a live group test. But in that moment, it was stark to me, the difference of how are some people succeeding and others not. Turns out that we were able to wind back what everyone was doing, how they found the fix. Some people Googled slightly different terms, and it led them to a getting started page. Everyone else landed on a philosophy page that had a Express router, Ember router, and an Angular router, 0 React routers. Not what you'd expect on a React router project. But the maintainers were not aware of this. It wasn't something that top of mind. They knew they had a getting started page. It was a blind spot after a project evolves over time. So this is something where I could have just kept whining and moaning about how awful the experience was. But then I was like, oh yeah, I'm a developer. I can fix this. I can do this. I have the power. I hope. Well, and it turns out I just had to relocate some stuff, rearrange the state projector. I just had to rearrange the order that the pages were coming up in their documentation system. I had no idea how their docs were being built or what their markdown to HTML static site thing. I still don't even know how they do it. But I was able to trace the words and the titles from their docs, from the philosophy page back. I was able to unwind. I recalled my fix, which was basically, you got to land on the right page. And then it was just a matter of parsing, looking through the doc, or looking through the code, and trying to find that philosophy page and figure out why it's coming up so often. So it only took one change. So my most impactful contribution to React Router, by the way, the thing that changed the experience for the majority of people trying to find it or look at the website, only took one character change. Like, so if you look at the Git thing, it's got like one red, one green, that's it. But it doesn't take much to make a huge difference here. So, oh yeah, I forgot, I had some great GIFs. This is really gold. This is probably the best part of my talk. I should probably give it some more time. So really, like, remember the struggle, like, and part of that is looking at your package JSON. Look at your, I know, look at your package JSON and scan that package list. What doesn't spark joy? What was terrible? What made you go on a Google hunt or swearing at the heavens about outdated docs? All those things are common dev experiences. They're all opportunities to improve the situation for the next developers to come. So the key is just keep being mindful of making it better for the next developer. Okay, maybe that wasn't the right GIF. Let me try another. Okay, again. Okay, I swear I got my GIF game. It's coming back. Okay, you get the point. You know, when in doubt, at least just add some great GIFs. That'll smooth over a lot of issues. The point is just be conscious of what sucked. Try to make things better for the next dev. And you know, when in doubt, you'll always win people over throwing a killer GIF in that pull request. So, pro tip. So, okay, let me really dive into this. This next part is critically important. I want to dive back and just say, start with the docs. My biggest mistake when I first started doing open source was, I want to do the real stuff. I want to do the code. I want to be a real developer, real open sourcer. And you know what happened? I got shot down like 80% of the time because I didn't know how to gain a consensus. I didn't know how to get consensus from the right people. I didn't know how to communicate across these cultural barriers or language barriers. And again, programming language barriers. All of these things, I was able to get free experience, again, without being fired, getting rid of those rejections. The key thing is, though, I suddenly noticed that the docs were terrible on a lot of projects. And I figured, hey, it only takes a little code example to fix this. Because I was very uncomfortable writing English words in docs. I didn't have any faith in my ability to do that, and still, don't check my work. No, the imposter syndrome gets us all. The point is that docs are a great way to demonstrate that you know the code and you can communicate it. It shows communication skills and it shows mastery of your code, and you know what's most important to developers. You've got a higher level awareness of what is needed to get going. So actually docs are some of the harder things to do in a sense. But if you've already gone through the work, if you've done the thing to get your job done, you might as well capitalize on that pain. I mean, that mindset changed how I think about this and made it so I could suddenly reevaluate and be like, wait, good can come of the struggle. And it's really important. So I kind of have to give that caveat, because less effort, big impact. It definitely is easier to have a big impact. And if you've already done the work, that's what I mean by the less effort part. If it's a new library that you're struggling with, if it's not something you're getting paid to do, it might be a little harder to convince yourself to go ahead and just spend the time on. And also, you know, code changes take a lot to get merged. You have to, you know, API changes, you might be waiting for a semver, major, minor, whatever, and even the fight about what semver, major, and minor is to a given project, or if an API extension, adding an argument may break other people who didn't know how to use the library or whatever. All those discussions can be maddening when you're just like, my code does the thing, it passes all the tests. Why are you arguing about these inane things? And not that semver is important. It wasn't supposed to sound patronizing. But some people in here I've had a discussion on this about. So the important thing is that, you know, you've got to be able to understand that some projects are on different timelines, and just accept that. That's an important thing, but the timeline for docs is generally a lot tighter. It's a lot easier to get those things landed, and it's almost always welcomed with a party and the maintainers loving you. And guess what? the best way to meet a maintainer or some dev celebrity, give them some code, give them some docs. They'll be right there to tell you it sucks. I mean, when it does, hopefully. But no, it's amazing. I've built out a nice Rolodex. No, I guess it's an anachronistic. Never mind. You know what Rolodexes are? Anyway. Yes. So I built a nice Rolodex of dev contacts that are rather well known, and it's primarily because I've been able to just give them code, build that relationship over time. Even if it's like once a year, once every other year, I give them some code. It's amazing the relationships that you'll build up just doing that. It's not like I'm their best friend, but I'll always get an answer when I reach out. And it wasn't the case before I started offering fixes. And that's really one of those side benefits people don't really talk about. And really I guess I already covered the small fixes. This is a new slide deck I'm operating. No. To my students watching, make sure you practice every presentation before you do it with the slides and code freeze them. Okay, moving on. Yeah, no, do it live. So really, let me reiterate this point because it's critical. When you have solved something for work, or you've solved something or figured out how to make a project work with some library that didn't connect, share it, fix it. This is key. This is a way to take that pain and just go that extra mile to get over that hill, and you're suddenly in a different mindset. You suddenly made it a contribution that you can put on your resume, your portfolio, and create a story around. So free feedback and reviews, like I said, they'll tell you when it's crap. They'll also tell you when it's good, or you'll get to get an expert's perspective to tell you what's important. Or, hey, I was coming to this README thinking that this example is the most important thing. Cool, well, if the maintainer maybe didn't understand how you were getting there, maybe the maintainer didn't have an understanding of the users of their library as it's been changing over years or however long. That's hard to, those things are not constant, and it's easy for a maintainer or a project owner to lose sight of those changing winds as time goes on. So take advantage of that discussion, because you may have someone say, oh no, that's not where people get to figure out how to use this thing. You can say, no, like I came to this from Google, and I screenshot my search and say React router examples, and then I got a philosophy page. That's weird. So it's not even like their problem, it's just Google sometimes gives interesting results. And this is the type of observation that especially junior developers are well suited to find, because you're typing the most obvious Google searches to try find the thing. And that is something that the maintainers of a project will never ever think about. Like once they've got their site up, they'll maybe check it once to see if it's in Google with one search term and if it comes up with the project name. that's about all I've ever done for my projects. So, oh yeah. So the feedback loop that you get really can help maintainers understand how to make their projector work. So it really, you could actually be seen as a valuable asset to the maintainers in a way that provides perspective that no one else was providing. That is a key thing that shows a higher level awareness of how this project's being used. Yeah, you may not have built the whole new, the suspense API in React, or you may have, but the key is if you're searching for it and you're finding garbage or it's confusing, or maybe some blog article that's great is the 10th one, and those examples would really be better if they were moved up into the README or moved somewhere else that more developers are finding. Sometimes it's, so the key things when you're finding these things, you want to be aware of what the community, how dialed in it is, how active it is, and where it is. hopefully everything's on GitHub. Sorry, GitLab. And hopefully, I love GitLab. Well, I'm just saying, everything should be on GitHub. I mean, it's kind of a standard. The key is you also want to find out what communication channels there are. Do they want to hear it via IRC? Do they want to hear about your issues on Slack? Do they want to hear it on Discord? Do they want to hear it only as a pull request? Sometimes these things are documented. Sometimes a project will actually say, hey, here's a maintainers or contributing .NET Markdown. Cool. Not always though. Sometimes that's not the case, and you kind of have to feel it out. You got to guess and see how issues are being accepted, reviewed. If every pull request has to have an issue. Those sorts of things are. You've got to be aware of the activity. It'll give you a good idea of what to expect. And also, if you can go and read other people's, the chat or the communication logs of how these things are going through, how much people review the code, you could easily get a sense just looking at closed pull requests or closed issues to see what it's like for the, the prior poor souls who went through the process, and you can kind of get a feel for what's in store for you and how to actually successfully land something. So you can see when things are out of scope. You can see when things are on target or well scoped or well pitched. A lot of the times, if it's a full first PR, that may be seen as you may be overly ambitious, or sometimes the maintainer will say, okay, give me this just 5 individual pull requests because this is too big. So sometimes seeing what has previously gone over well and not well will really help accelerate your experience contributing to a project. And I'd actually start with viewing the closed pull requests and issues before I even bother with the contributing .markdown. Just because that file gets out of date, the issues are constantly churning. And if they're not, it's a dead project. So really, you want to look for signs of life in your project, and you want to kind of absorb all this. But don't spend too much time. If you just want to put the npm install command or replace the yarn install command that is on its own, and then maybe that's easy for us seniors to deal with because we know the package name and know how to work npm. But to juniors, they may run into that, run the command, and then they go down a rabbit hole trying to figure out how to install yarn. And those sorts of things are easy to dismiss as a senior. But as a junior, that's a great opportunity for you. You're like, hey, let's bring this so that this is more accessible to everyone. It just takes an npm command rather than, I've seen it in a lot of projects that just have a yarn or will have it on one page and other pages will have the npm version. Sometimes I'll have both commands for the global, and then for the local, it'll just be the yarn command. Those are like trivial, and you can ignore those as an experienced developer. But as a junior, those sorts of differences create a lot of friction. And those are great low-hanging fruit that a lot of people overlook. Look out for those things. When you find something weird in the docs that's inconsistent, don't think it's you. Ask the question. Figure out what's wrong. Go create an issue. Say, hey, there's some inconsistency here in this install command. Can I fix it? How about this I get? They'll probably just say, yeah, I didn't notice. Cool, do it. It's really that easy. So, and by the way, this when I tell people to check for signs of life on GitHub Insights, apparently no one knows about this. Just want to draw some attention to this with a screenshot. So if you've ever wondered what that little bar chart that's labeled Insights, I guess they ran out of words for statistics or traffic or data and whatever. So Insights, okay, I guess it does provide that. This is a key view, and you can look at it by, I think, a day, a week, a month. So it gives you only a really tight window, so all you can see is the pulse of a project. This is a great way to do it. In fact, this is probably the best and cheapest way to see if a project's still alive. Also, you get the data of how many contributors are there, how many are new contributors, and also the number of active pull requests and the ratio to active issues. That also will help you understand if issues are required. Some projects are really touchy about, hey, you have to talk to us via an issue. If you just create the pull request, I don't care how broken it was, we're not even going to look at it, no matter how fixing it is. Which, when people are that committed to the process, don't argue. But, that can be silly, and rather, I would advise you, if you're ever in a maintainer position, don't be so hard line on it. Sometimes people are like, hey, here's code. Pull requests are a discussion around code. Issues are a discussion around an issue. It may involve code in the future or multiple proposed code solutions. That is, they serve different purposes. So pay attention to what's being done on a project, look at this page, try to read between the lines. And admittedly, it does take a little practice, but after your second or third pull request, you'll know what to look for, and you'll know what to expect on timeliness and how quickly these things turn. So
Can I ask a question?
yeah.
So there's closed issues, and those are in the active issues. So a closed issue is the maintainer comes in and says this is closed. But what happens if an issue is truly no longer active? Is that the only place it can end up, or is it archived?
So there's a little bit of a weird thing. Let me bring up the language that. So Cameron brings up a great point. There's only closed and open issues. There's only you can have a merged pull request, but then it's closed. The statuses of these things are binary in a sense, and even the word issue, it creates issues with program managers. Like, you talk to them, I found an issue, and it's like, well, wait, you're trying to add some docs or write a getting started guide. Is that an issue? Well, if I frame it in the negative, can it be? So there's a weird thing with the wording. Not everything's an issue. Some of these are, features or things that you're trying to add. The issue then becomes the missing feature. Then it just seems like you're really trying to force your hand with the, you're claiming that some open source project is lacking this feature, and how could you have this issue? It leads to a weird dynamic, but it's I think if you're well immersed in the GitHub open source life, those, you kind of forget about the wording issues, or is a closed issue resolved or a closed issue ignored? You'll have to check it, because they just close, and if you have a pull request associated and that merges, you can set it up to auto close that. So there is a way. You've got to know how to read the system and read the trail of links and how GitHub connects those different pieces.
So once an issue exists, is there a way for it to no longer be part of the active issues?
Just close it.
So why is it in the closed issue? So there's 188 active issues, 116 closed issues, 72 new issues, and so those two together add up to the active issues. So why are the closed issues part of the active issues?
I don't know, maybe you need to submit a pull request to GitHub. So
I feel like that we want to keep in scope as far as if they've added, they could have added new issues over the last week, and total they have 188 active issues, so they're only tracking something new.
I think.
Updating.
Yeah, I think it has to do with the time window. I think they may be saying that they were active and switched to closed, and there's a cumulative new amount of active within this time window. Again, the language and the way this is framed, I get it. I don't know exactly.
Touch it.
That didn't move.
Touch it.
Maybe active in this sense means that it was created within the last month, but then also closed, right? It was new and then closed.
Yeah, so you can see,
active,
yeah, maybe a measure of burn down to see if you're actually getting ahead of the issue count, or if you're adding more than you're closing. Those sorts of health metrics are important in certain contexts. But that sort of dynamic, again, these numbers are more important on a relative sense, because you'll know which projects are, just crickets and dead quiet, nothing's going on. As long as these numbers are moving and things are being merged, that's really what you're looking for. And if you go and look at the closed pull requests on that tab, you can go and click back and just see the dates of when they were last merged, because it sorts by default with the date it was merged, I believe, or the last comment. That will show you how long, these people, when they started the thing, and how much conversation was involved, how much give and take. Did they have to elaborately communicate their ideas with animated GIFs, or with screenshots, or other evidence, or whatever? You can find out what's involved going through the unwinding what people have previously landed. So I go here to check just to see if there's a pulse, and then I go back to. And by the way, Pulse is a different link in GitHub. Never mind. Again, GitHub has a challenge in providing all the stats and making it use sensible words. It's not that straightforward. I get it. I'm not criticizing GitHub. I love you guys. But yeah, so definitely my move is to just look at this. I don't really agonize over the numbers. I want to see a number of contributors. I want to know that they're willing and welcoming people. That, you know, I've found projects that are like, well, if you don't have a PhD, you know, we're not even going to really bother it with your code. I mean, that was basically communicated to me in private once. I was like, wait, what? Okay, but I passed the tests, and he's like, well, you know, if you went to a proper university with, you know, one of those types, you know, so you'll run into that. But if I'd have checked the screen first, I would have seen that, oh, he's not just doing that to me. He's the only contributor, but plenty of people are submitting code. None of them are getting merged. And in fact, like, he'd piece apart the code and then merge it himself. I won't name names, but like sometimes you'll find those. And I could have saved myself the agony and pain by just checking here to see, oh, 1 or 2 contributors, like 50 pull requests. Wait a second. And
All right, you got me.
Yeah.
Get those commits on.
Yeah. Yeah. You gotta also crush souls. That's really part of it, right? No. So.
Pay forward.
But. So yeah, let me wrap this up. I wanted to open this up to more questions because I saw some people indicating. Yep.
Yeah. So this was asked by one of my buddies. So what motivates open source software contributors, and what are the best ways that you can develop a community around OSS projects?
Developing a community around OSS projects, that's a whole nother talk. But, wait, what was the first one?
What motivates open source software contributors?
Selfishness? No, I mean, really, the initial, my points were at the beginning here on you get free exposure to different technology stacks and things. You get to understand the trade-offs that have been made over time in any given project. You get to see the reasons they have to go with some janky, like barely functioning shell script that executes 80% of the time it works. Same tests. Yeah.
You get code comprehension skills. So
Yeah.
if you're constantly being exposed to different code bases and in some cases different languages, your ability to read other people's code and work with other people's code grows up way faster.
Yeah, Evan's point to code fluency, yeah, exposure to diverse tech and diverse teams. Basically, it's as if you got a job on some team and then got fired without all the heartache and pain and effort. Just the work piece. Evan, is that code fluency? Derek?
What's the best way to go about, like, if you do have like your work like merged into the code base? What's the best way to go about promoting it on like your resume or LinkedIn?
So it's less important how, more important that you mention it somewhere, maybe in your cover letter, on your resume, or write a paragraph describing your commitment to community and demonstrate it by listing what you've done or describing it. Even if it's that one line or one character change I did to React Router that changed the whole homepage. Make a point to say, hey, I found the smallest little thing that made the biggest impact. So, you know, focus on what story you can tell. Figure out what value add you can, you know, how you can describe what matters to you, because when you're talking about these contributions in the setting of an interview at least, you really have the ability to pull these stories and create a narrative given what you're being prompted to. Like this is sometimes people want to know how you deal with adversity because they've got a terrible corporate culture and everything's an adverse experience. I see some people here know exactly what I'm talking about. And that sort of a thing, it's easy to just show like, hey, I have the grit to get things merged even though I worked through all these fighting parties and stakeholders. They didn't agree. I found out what their needs were, and this is how I adapted to it. And hey, I was able to come to a consensus, pare some of my initial pull requests down a bit, and address some of their needs. So you can show your team skills, how you evaluated trade-offs, and so use that in whatever context makes sense. And that may be in a cover letter, that may be in your resume when you want to talk about how you've used different tech. You can anecdote, hey, I happen to be a contributor to so-and-so. that sort of thing is a good place to do it. I actually struggle with this as well. I have an index on my about page on my blog. I just kind of awkwardly copied like the header bars from GitHub projects. And I don't know, it kind of seems ego-driven. I'm not really that thrilled by it. But I was recently in the job hunt, so I felt forced. So it's definitely something that you've got to kind of figure out exactly how to pull into your positioning in the market, how to tie it in, but definitely tweet about it. You'll probably get more exposure to the maintainers of the project. Definitely if you're not on Twitter, what are you even doing? And also if you're on Twitter, follow me, just SML. And that's I remembered it twice, yes. Okay, getting good at this remembering my name stuff. Derek, did that answer your question?
Definitely did.
Okay.
Yeah, the headphones on.
Yeah, no headphones, you're right.
Yeah, this is not me, it's fake.
Should you pretty much always be trying to get some contributor buy-in to an issue before trying to make a PR?
That's advisable. Yeah, so for the live stream, if you couldn't hear that, should you always get buy-in from maintainers or by filing an issue first before doing the work? The reason I didn't emphasize that is because I'm coming to this as, hey, I've already done the work. I already went through figuring out the pain of why this was broken anyway, incorporated it into my project, found the solution. So it should be as easy as copy-paste or just putting some brain cycles into the point of pain and figuring out how to inject the code examples that would have helped you or the instructions. So at that point, you can kind of submit a pull request and they can take it or leave it. But it might be best to discuss it first just to kind of grease those wheels. I'd probably recommend that as a default stance. Just try to do the issue to frame it, even if you've got the work ready to do the pull request. And I definitely do that when projects say it's mandatory to do an issue first. I'll just be like, okay, well, I've got the pull request on ice. I'll submit the issue, and then as soon as I get a comment, I'll be like, okay, cool, PR incoming. And because really, the thing about a pull request is you get to. It's not my phone. The thing about a pull request is it's a discussion about code. It enables you to write line comments. It's the best place to talk. It forces you to get the egos out. It forces you, well, not to, it's more likely to get the egos out of the way. Okay, yeah, we're a bunch of prima donna developers, and the egos never go away. But the issue, someone get you triggered. So getting consensus is definitely, I definitely recommend it, and it's also a good way to build those relationships and networking. So, but the thing is, when you go to the pull request, if things get personal in the issue or people aren't understanding each other, and you can't, do screen gifs, by the way, or like record your screen to show things, because oftentimes people are talking past each other, and that's when issues fall apart. But when you submit a pull request, it's about the code. It's about what it's just like you can't like attack the thing and say, hey, can you give me a review on the code, or is this something you're interested in or not? And at that point, it helps drive the discussion, and really this becomes more apparent when you're dealing with an issue with multiple pull requests, multiple code proposals. You'll mostly see that just in like large code bases like Node or React, really in Node. I think only like 9% of the pull requests are accepted. So when there's a tough competition or the bar is really high, that is a situation where you want to be able to separate the conversation about your pull request, your code proposal out, so that the discussion doesn't get muddied and you're not talking about 30 different people's code proposals in a mess of an issue, where it's nice when that issue discussion is like, hey, here's the pull request for my proposal. Oh, here's another person, here's their proposal. And you can then go and see how the code is being reviewed and what trade-offs are being valued or not. And that sort of, it's a way to get your own little discussion going about your code. So at that point of view, I don't know, definitely look at what the pull requests are doing and what the issues look like, and follow whatever the successful pull requests have been doing. That's the rule of thumb I go Is there another question there behind you?
I feel like, I mean, super great talk, by the way. I feel like I learned a lot. I think like something that you really emphasized was like finding like things that you've had problems with in the past and like finding ways to contribute to them, and like making the problem go away. Like if you, I don't know if you have any like resources for like, if you're just kind of looking for open source projects, I don't know if there is like like there's like a list out there or like, but like somewhere like on GitHub you can find more open source projects that maybe like you might be able to dig around a little bit and then see like how you could contribute to it more than like.
So what's the last project that you were looking at that caused you to have to Google an answer or find an example? Like it's that, like you want to get that specific. Because it's not so much of looking for lists of opportunities, and there are lists of like great welcoming communities, and like that is a way to look at it, but that sets you up as a spectator. It doesn't really. Oftentimes, I've seen students go down that route and then find themselves overwhelmed at this just endless sea of all these other people are doing it. How are they so much smarter? How do they figure this out? And you're just reading the code, trying to infer how they got there, when it could have taken them months to get to that solution. Or it could, like, you don't know the full story. So by going as a tourist, looking at like open source communities, looking for good places that are welcoming to contribute to, you end up with a distorted perspective. Actually, if you start with the personal perspective of, hey, this major library I tried to use, I couldn't figure it out. If you get over that inhibition of like, hey, this can't be me, or it has to be me. It can't be this huge project that everyone uses. Well, actually, you're probably a good indicator that there's a whole swath of developers out there who aren't having, or who are having just as much of a struggle with that library. So it's a good indication that you're not alone. And actually, sometimes I've submitted code that turns out to be, oh, hey, dummy, didn't you just read the lines a few above? And even in those cases, I still build a great relationship out of it. You know, so like I showed that I cared enough to try and make it better. So that right there is like really be mindful when you're working through code or working through projects, even if it's just boilerplate projects or you're trying to build a Reddit clone or whatever, figure out whatever projects you use to implement it. You know, if anything leads you to run out of breadcrumbs in that trail or that guide you're trying to follow, anything causes that to run out or the confusion to start, it's because the person who wrote it assumes that you have the knowledge required to fill in the blanks. And authors of this material, they never know where to stop on the detail or when they're going too deep, or if they left out one key detail like that would have unlocked it for a bunch of juniors. That is the key opportunity. Did that answer your question?
No, I think so, definitely. I think that's, yeah.
And if you always have a great time with your packages and libraries, again, I think I want to talk to you and the other guy by the end. I really need to understand your choices in life. Were there any other questions?
Another one from me. So
okay.
is it just like slightly bad form or very bad form if a code base has tests and you want to put something in there to not write additional tests for what you're trying to put in?
So again, this gets to why docs are. So the question, if you didn't hear on stream, is if you are submitting code, maybe you want to you run into a situation where, oh, it turns out they have exhaustive tests and the feature you added needs like 5 more tests and maybe breaks existing tests, which is a very complex scenario to deal with. So that situation is really why I emphasize just stick to the docs first, because once you do that and you build trust in that community, you can actually pivot and that social, that goodwill that you build, doing the work that few people are paying attention to. It's a lot easier to actually land code changes after you've got that relationship. And you're also you're going to have a better time asking for help getting the tests written or figuring out what trade-offs. Oh, is it okay that this test broke? Is this actually something that's being used? Or they'll know about those features. Is this something that gets any attraction on your Google Analytics on the docs? Oh, this is the least used API? Okay, well that's why it always breaks when I change something. Okay, maybe can we get rid of it? Those sorts of insights are really valuable that you could give to a maintainer, because they don't ask themselves those questions very often. But you may, in giving that perspective, saying, hey, I have code, I don't have the tests, how should I go about this? Or, hey, my tests aren't fully working, can you help me figure out what's going on? That's a great way to get really high-level insights from experts, hopefully, that will help you figure out why it's broken, or what assumptions you're making, or what assumptions they're making, or figure out what's missing in that equation. But again, that's a very difficult road to walk, and it really is a lot easier to just start with the docs. There's no tests to fail. That's
Not yet.
actually, now that I think about it, React Router did lint their code test the examples in their docs. Okay, so yeah, most of the time they're not, docs are free of those toolchain issues. But the pathway for code, definitely do if you have a solution, or if you've put in the work again that you did for the docs. If you're in that same boat where I found the example that unlocked my using this library, but you found some hack for the code or to make some API endpoint work. Okay, if it's already, the work is done, maybe that's the appropriate point in time to start. But definitely I would wait till you're later in your career or later in your open source career to go run headlong into code submissions. Which reminds me, I heard you got a merge.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I got my first merge. So
yeah. Well, Cameron, you want to share?
Yeah. It was React Big Calendar, so it's sort of React version of Full Calendar, and I basically just was using it, and I needed a callback to expose just when a drag interaction started, and there was no callback, so I made an issue, asked about it. They said if you wanted to do a PR, do it, and so it was like 6 lines of code, but then it made my project.
Yeah.
So,
Nicely done, Cameron.
how long did that take? It took like an hour to do, and then about 2 months to get merged.
There's a
So-
dependency for a project that's like in prod, right?
What's that?
Like there's a dependency you're relying on for a project. So.
Yeah, I actually made my own forge version with my code change.
Yeah,
I just
so
have to figure out sender and when the new npm update gets released.
Yeah. See, this is all the steps and things that come up. So if you didn't hear on stream, an hour of work, a month or two to get merged. Yeah, that's how code changes typically, they can sit on the back burner or sit on a feature pipeline waiting for them to cut a major release. You don't get to dictate those terms, or oftentimes you barely have any insight into like what that time frame is going to look like. So code is just it can be a very thankless angle, that could have been 6 months, or, and it can really take the wind out of your sails. So really focus on those high value contributions without the strings attached, docs. So, but way to go, Cameron. It's really impressive stuff. Any other questions? Going once, going twice? Sold. Thank you.